The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, Week 5 DraftKings picks and preview. Again, this is for the main slate only. No Thursday, no Sunday night, no Monday night. So when you ask, hey, where is this guy? It's because they aren't on the main slate. Big shocker, I know. Nothing's changed in 4 years, but these are the comments that I constantly get. So I figured I'd let you know right now. Don't be afraid to smash the like button. And if you do give it a like, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section and tell me, if you had to play one tight end from lower than $3,000, which tight end would it be? You do those three things, boom, you're in a draw for 20 DK bucks. I'll be announcing the winner on Monday's live show at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on the DraftKings YouTube channel. So tune into that. You can find the cheat sheet up on dkplaybook.com as well on Thursday morning if you just want to check out who the picks are and not have to worry about listening to me or any of my guests. First up, from dailyroto.com, where if you use the promo code THEPME, you get yourself 10% off. It's Mike Leone. What's going on?
Not too much. Haven't been on the show in a few weeks, so I'm looking forward to it. And I haven't been on the show with Davis in quite some time, so hopefully we'll butt heads quite a bit.
Well, spoiler alert, the other guest on the show, the host of the Take Cast and writing for, I think, every single site in the fantasy industry, is Davis Mattek.
Yeah, if you want to hire me, slide in my DMs. I'll probably write a fantasy football article for you. And also, you should all listen to the Take Cast.
You should definitely
yes,
go.
You can hear him mispronounce Daily Roto as Daily Rodeo.
Well,
I told Drew I would re-record the drop.
Yeah, but did you?
Haven't yet. Hasn't been an episode out yet this week.
Fair.
Do you do any rodeo projections, Mike?
You know, it's in the pipeline, but
Daily Fantasy Rodeo is definitely coming to DraftKings before the year 2021. They will sign an exclusive deal with Professional Bull Riding, and that will be an option on the site.
Yeah, you can get points for place, points per time spent on. I don't even really know how it works. Don't you just try and stay on as long as possible?
They'll find a way. Arena football is going to end up on DraftKings. Bull riding can get on DraftKings.
Can we get XFL on DraftKings? I think I'd be all in on that.
I'm 100% sure when that league becomes a reality that it will be on DraftKings.
All right. Well, let's talk about DraftKings this week. We'll start at the running back position. We'll go actually, let me get your thoughts on the actual running back slate in terms of pricing. Mike, what do we do here? We can't just pay up for all the good guys because there's no one at the bottom.
Yeah, it's a really difficult slate at first glance. I think you have to build a bit more balanced. And I think in tournaments, especially, there might be edge in building these balanced lineups. They give you more upside because people are so used to mashing in these studs and duds lineups that they could the first few weeks of the season. It was pretty easy to do. And I feel like people might want to try and do that again. And instead of acknowledging they should go balanced, they're just going to sift through and try and find the duds that make the studs work. And those guys are going to be shaky plays. I mean, there are some there that could pay off, but the hit rate's going to be a lot lower than what we've seen early on, where the chalk has just hit so at such a high rate. And part of that just because the way the pricing's been pretty loose. So the tighter pricing, I really like balanced approaches to GPPs this week.
Davis, where do you think you would start at running back if you were going to take one of the high-end options? I like Melvin Gordon the best of the top three guys, but once we drop down, I'm thinking James Conner might be the play since everyone hates his guts now.
I would actually probably just go McCaffrey because you're locking in 13 points before you even get to any rushing attempts from him. He just gets so many targets, which is the number one most valuable thing to have on DraftKings. And he has not scored a touchdown yet this year. So I think that there's even a ceiling for his per game averages that we haven't even come close to touching yet. So McCaffrey is probably the guy that I'm looking at the first running back that I'm looking to get in, because I just don't think you are going to be able to get Gurley this week.
Do we start to worry that McCaffrey, he's going to score a touchdown at some point, but his touchdown expectancy is just so much lower than all these other running backs because Cam steals all of his touchdowns?
But it's priced in. If McCaffrey was getting all of these targets and was getting some goal line carries, he would be at Todd Gurley's salary. He would be $9,000 on DraftKings.
Yeah, but for $600 more, you get Melvin Gordon, who's a huge part of the passing game anyway and leads the league in targets inside the 10-yard line.
Yeah, certainly I have no issue with Melvin. I mean, Eckler is actually stealing more of his work than I thought. He's kind of getting like 25% of the running back carries plus receptions, which is not great. But I think the $600 actually probably does matter this week.
Mike, if you're going to start with one of these running backs, where do you start at? Because it looks like Mixon may or may not play. If Mixon sits, you just play Gio and go nuts?
I think so. I do want to see also the health of Walton. Mark Walton, he played nearly 40% of the snaps last week. So that has me a little jittery on Gio, even though the results were there. So the health statuses of those two guys are definitely going to play a role. I think ultimately, even if, Walton does play and if Mixon's still out, Gio is really the guy at sub 7K. I think this price tag is just too cheap. And that, leans in towards that balanced lineup that I was talking about a lot. As far as the expensive guys, I'm really torn between McCaffrey and Gordon. We've got McCaffrey as the slightly better value right now and is the guy with the higher floor. But because of that touchdown equity that you talked about, Mayo, we've got Gordon when you look at like his 90th percentile plus outcomes with a few points higher projection, which is a pretty big deal. So I guess it kind of depends on format, but I would expect the ownership to be higher on Gordon than on McCaffrey.
Well, Barkley and Connor are those $7,000 guys. And when you think about the Giants going up against Carolina, that it's not the greatest matchup, but it could be another one of those games like they played, in Dallas earlier this year, where it's just Barkley on just 0-yard catches, basically solidifying his floor. He ends up sneaking into the end zone last week and ends up with a pretty good day out of it. And people are legit scorned with James Conner. Now he's playing in the highest projected point total game of the season so far. And I don't know if anyone's going to own him.
If people don't own James Conner, that's crazy. I think like behind Gio, he would be, my starter at the position. So if Mixon plays, you cut Gio out. I'm going right to Conner. He's way too cheap. The Atlanta defense has been really bad. They are always funneling targets to the running back position. And we've seen, Conner with a handful of targets, at least in each of the games he's played this season. The total is really high. We're projecting Pittsburgh to run a ton of plays in this game, which is something that goes overlooked at times. But the more plays, the more chances to rack up fantasy points, pretty simple down the line deduction there. So I'm with you on Conner. I would be surprised if by the end of the week he ends up low owned, though. I think people are going to end up coming around on him. The total is going to be too high. They're going to look at the Atlanta defensive metrics, especially against running backs. I think he'll end up being owned, but he's my second favorite value behind Gio on the slate. So even if he's owned a little bit, I'll have plenty of him.
Well, the Falcons and the Steelers are both top 10 in terms of pace of play as the two of the fastest teams in the league. So like you mentioned, more plays, more scoring, better for everyone. But when you try to squeeze Connor into one of these game stacks featuring those two teams, he seems like the man that's just going to be getting lost here because they'll want to play either Ben or Matt Ryan. Then they'll want to play Antonio Brown. They'll want to play Juju. They'll want to play Ridley. And then we have the situation in the Falcons backfield where Freeman may or may not play. Davis, would you go back to Coleman and pray he finally has a decent week if Freeman sits again?
No, and it sounds more likely than not that Freeman is going to play. I'm with you guys on Connor being a great play. I definitely would like to get him in cash, although the emergence of TJ Yeldon as a really strong value option this week is probably going to I actually think that to your point, Pat, I actually think Yeldon emerging will make Connor much less owned.
Would you go Yeldon in cash, Mike?
Yeah, I'd play Yeldon in cash, $5,600. And the snap share for him was really favorable last week. He out-carried Corey Grant. I think it was like 17-1. He's had 14% market share of the team's targets. It's going against KC, so you're going to get up in pace a little bit. You're getting a really bad Kansas City defense. It checks most of the boxes for me. There's something with Yeldon that from just a purely feel perspective, I wonder how high the ceiling is for him on a weekly basis. But for cash games, it's a really good per dollar value, and the price fits the slate really well because you're not going to find anyone that's really that safe sub 5K. There are some interesting sub 5K names for GPPs, but none of them you can feel confident using in cash, whereas I feel pretty confident using Yeldon in cash.
The only drawback to Yeldon is every time that we've seen Fournette end up out before the game, it always seems like, and maybe this is just me misremembering everything, but when Yeldon comes in and he's the starter, that's when the Grant split becomes more pronounced, that Grant actually gets involved. They scheme plays for him. And when he just takes over for Fournette, it just seems like he's the lead back. We all get sucked into TJ Yeldon. He doesn't do anything when it comes game day.
Yeah, I mean, Corey Grant on the years at 0.82 or 0.82 fantasy points per carry, just 2.67 yards per carry. So it does feel that way. I do feel like Yeldon has all the big games when we're not using him, when Fournette goes down mid-game, and then when everyone piles on to Yeldon, when Fournette's actually out, it's difficult. But I wouldn't be too worried about it. Like I said, even though it was a mid-game absence for Fournette last week, I was really encouraged by the snap split to the point where I still expect Corey Grant to get some, but I don't think it's going to cut in enough.
It'll be like 8
really
touches.
bad 4 game.
It'll be like 8 touches for Grant and like 15 to 18 for Yeldon. But Yeldon would get the first crack at the goal line if they have, like, if they get a pass interference call to Keelan Cole in the end zone. Yeldon is the one getting the carry, most likely from the 1 yard line. And Yeldon also, people like think of him as like a grinding back, like kind of built like Chris Ivory was, or like Fournette. But actually, he's like this really agile player who they trust as a receiver, like quite a bit. So I think Yeldon for 5,600 is kind of an easy play in this spot. And also, he was bad the week he was chalk that week against the Patriots, and that does weigh on some people's minds. But he's been really good in the other 3 games this year.
Is it worth it to just pay up the $700 and get David Johnson, who's just at 6,300 against San Fran now?
Man,
I will have a lot of
whole,
David Johnson.
That's a whole thing.
Davis, go ahead.
What?
I mean, it's just like the David Johnson thing. It's just a whole thing. And my take on that is, yeah, the snap share went way up. The carry share went up. He was playing more as a receiver, but that offense is so bad. They're so, it's like playing LaShawn McCoy basically. Like, and I love David Johnson. David Johnson is like my boy. I, take him first overall and seasonal and all of that. But hitching myself to this offense right now in cash games feels pretty suboptimal.
Well, let's talk tournaments then. You're trying to win the Millionaire Maker. Do you just plug in David Johnson? If you can get David Johnson for 1/3 the ownership of TJ Yeldon, do you just play David Johnson?
Yeah, because like there's a 3 touchdown game out there for DJ for sure.
Mike?
Yeah, I think you play him. I mean, he's going to get the volume if the team runs even a remotely league average amount of plays. Like if they're even with like a standard deviation of league average amount of plays, they ran like no plays the first 2 weeks of the season. And it's a concern because the offense has been so bad. The offensive line has been terrible, but Rosen, I think, was a lot better than the stats indicated.
Yeah.
And I think, you've got a quarterback switch there with a guy who people think it's the same crappy offense as it was under Bradford, but I think there's a chance they're a little bit better. It's not a very good San Francisco defense. And the price tag, I mean, we're talking low 6,000s for David Johnson. So I think when you start running all the math on this, it makes sense. It's not purely a game theory play. I think there are some plays out there that, game theory, they don't rate that well projection-wise, but they could do it. Like David Johnson rates well projection-wise. I don't feel confident enough to use him in cash games, but that's the perfect leverage play if people aren't going to use him. A guy that already rates well, but nobody trusts it. Nobody trusts it. That was Corey Davis last week, the guy who's getting the volume, but the offense hasn't been good at all. And nobody trusts the projection. And he's going to pop well in a lot of different projection systems because of the volume, and nobody trusts it. Those are the type of plays I like to hammer in GPPs. I think that's David Johnson this week.
Of all the guys in the $5,000 area, so you start with Kareem Hunt at $5,800. Then you got like Breda, Yeldon, Lynch, Dion Lewis, Dalvin Cook, Carlos Hyde, Jay Ajayi, Alex Collins. So throw out TJ Yeldon, Davis. Is there anyone else in there you'd play?
I mean, there are some game theory reasons to play Hunt. The one I actually like is Matt Breida. I think this will be a good game script for him. Alfred Morris only had 4 carries last week, and Breida's this amazingly efficient runner. I would not play him in cash games this week because
we need to stop talking about cash games. No one gives a shit about cash games. Let's talk about winning $1 million.
Matt Breida can definitely help you win $1 million then. He's like a massively efficient running back. He is involved in the passing game. He's involved at the goal line. Matt Breida is an amazing football player, and he's underpriced. And this is actually one of the few games the rest of the way that San Francisco can win and get him in a good game script.
All right, I hate Matt Breida in the spot. He's way too expensive. Mike?
I hate Breida. He's way too expensive. I don't like a lot of these 5K guys. Can I go sub 5K? Because I think that's where you take your stabs in tournaments.
Well, I think the whole point was, the question was, is there anyone else you would play? You can just say no.
No, I mean, I don't really see straight line pivots off of Yalvin. I like DJ for a little bit more, and I like guys sub 5K, but I don't like anybody right around his price to just straight line pivot.
All right, so the one guy I did want to talk about was Carlos Hyde. He's $5,200. Not a great matchup against Baltimore, clearly, but in terms of sort of the Corey Davis thing where he was getting so much volume, no one trusted it. Carlos Hyde is getting all that volume. It's just a bad matchup. Like, I would feel more comfortable playing him than Breida, especially at the lower price, knowing that he gets the goal line touches. He's going to get 20 touches, and I don't expect Nick Chubb to end up with 2 60-plus yard rushing touchdowns this week.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to use someone, Hyde is the guy that we have projecting the best. We've got Deion Lewis there, but I don't think the game script's going to set up very well for Deion Lewis. So I would go Hyde. You know, if you put a gun to my head and made me pick someone, I think Hyde's way better than Breida. I'm not on the Breida play at all.
So after Breida,
I mean, why would you say that Hyde is way better when Breida is more likely to be in a good game script?
Why is he more likely to be in a good game script? San Francisco was terrible.
That might not even be good for him, being in a good game script.
Well, Morris
was banged up last week. You're like using these carries from last week as if 1 week of the carry shares automatically transferring to the next week.
Alfred Morris is old. Alfred Morris is old. I expect this is what I had the split projected for at the beginning of the year. So it's not surprising for me to see this trend emerge where Breida is more trusted and used more often.
Well, let's see if Morris is on the injury report again this week.
Well, I mean, he is right now.
But by the final injury report, we'll see. Okay.
We'll see.
I just worry about this team's ability to, especially with, you're going to have the Cardinals come in who play super slow. And then you have a decent pass rush on the Arizona side of the ball and a terrible offensive line in San Francisco. It doesn't seem like a game where there's going to be a ton of points scored. And then you're really relying on Brady to break a big one. And he's already done that once this year. It's not happening again.
I mean,
the price is just too high. It's the price is wrong.
I mean, if Breida is going to be sub 5%, like the way this conversation is going, I'm like, or sub 2%, I will be hammering him in all likelihood.
Yeah, but why is Matt Breida a significantly better play than Kareem Hunt, who's $100 more?
I mean, I think they're very similar plays, but I think Breida has, I think they have similar upsides. The downside for Hunt is all opponent based on the fact that they would pass a lot. And the downside for Breida is that he would get pulled at the goal line.
Well, that doesn't sound like a good thing for a guy who's averaging 11 touches a game.
We don't have like a great sample idea on that anyways, because there's not been a ton of goal line opportunities for San Francisco overall.
I'm out on Matt Breida. I think that he's like $1,500 too expensive. Like if he was 40,
I could see it. I mean, I could see it happening, but you're definitely taking a pretty big leap of faith that the volume is going to go exactly the way you think it's going to go. And if it happens, kudos to you.
I mean, that's what you have to do it. That's what you have to do in tournaments. So like if your opinion, your data leads you to have one opinion and the whole field disagrees with you, you should try and press that edge.
But I guess my point is, the volume you think he's going to have, he would need that to even be
to justify the price, right?
Like to even be in the conversation. Like it's a precursor to get into the conversation, and then from there he's a GPP play. So I think it's like 2 leaps, not 1 leap. You need to be right on the volume, and then
I'm playing jumping jacks with Matt Breida to get to where I need to go.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. You said you had some favorites from below $5,000. Who can we use from down there?
So I think Austin Eckler is really interesting. I know people don't like to use backup running backs, but he's had multiple red zone opportunities in every game. He's had at least 3 targets in every game. He's been insanely efficient. And, we've seen him spell Melvin Gordon at times that I think there are routes to him smashing. And you're talking about million maker situation. I think there's routes to him hitting value just in a regular course of the game, the way that he's being utilized, the way that the Chargers play. And if something happens to Melvin Gordon, I mean, I know you can't like plan on an injury, but just as like a 2% outcome, Eckler could totally break the slate. So I'm interested in him as someone where there's just a variety of ways where I could see that working out, whether it's a big play, Gordon gets banged up, or the volume just in one specific game just ends up leveling out a little bit more than it usually does.
I mean, Eckler is not averaging significantly fewer touches per game than Matt Breida is.
Yeah.
No, and you're $1,500 cheaper. You've got a way higher team total.
All right, so you have Austin Eckler. I'm probably going to end up giving Bilal Powell a look, although I worry that this could end up being a Crowell game, especially near the goal line, depending on how Denver shows up. But you can run on them. And if that's the case, and Powell's the one playing the majority of the snaps, he's playing over 60% right now, plus getting the work in the receiving game, I think that he could draw back some value. I don't really love it, though. Davis, is there anyone down there you actually really are going to ride for?
I don't know if I want to say ride for, but if there was ever going to be a Derrick Henry game for the Titans this year, this is probably going to be it against a Bills team that just doesn't look competent on offense. And I do think that the Titans coaching staff, knowing the struggles that they have with Mariota's elbow right now, that Gabbard is banged up, they have Austin Davis as their second quarterback. I think this has the potential to be Derrick Henry's highest carry total game of the year.
Yeah, I like Derrick Henry at $4,400, Mike.
Yeah, I like to play. He doesn't project well for us right now. That's partially because we have sort of like he's been terrible. We've got the normal volume split there, but it is the type of game, like Davis said, where if you just get into a certain game script and they absolutely feed him, he's a very talented back athletically. We saw it during the playoffs last year for Tennessee. So I like that play. I think two guys that have been extremely disappointing that you could make an argument as 5% plays, maybe 5 to 10% exposure plays. No one that I'm gonna like cape up for, but I just rather take chances with you guys will make fun of me, a LaShawn McCoy or a Kenyon Drake rather than some of these 5K guys who are more expensive, because I think the savings matters this week, and I think the uncertainty is about the same as a lot of these 5K guys as it is with these sub 5K guys, at least relative to price tag.
Is there any running back below $4,000 that you would feel comfortable squeezing in? Like, is it Jalen Richard in play, a Wendell Smallwood in play, if Clement and Sproles?
Ty Montgomery.
Okay, why Ty Montgomery?
If Randall Cobb's out, if Randall Cobb's out, I think you can see him used in the passing game a decent bit. He almost broke a big catch for a touchdown against the Bills. And I think they'll also go hot hand as far as who's carrying the ball. It was Aaron Jones last week, and I expect, it'll be a split between Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, Ty Montgomery this week. But I just think there's certain situations where if Montgomery's playing really well or the other two backs aren't playing that well, or if it just gets into a shootout type atmosphere and you're going very pass heavy, that Ty Montgomery plays a lot of snaps. And if you're playing a lot of snaps as the Green Bay running back / short yardage receiving option, the upside's pretty high for a sub 4K guy.
Davis, if Devonta Freeman sits, instead of playing Tevin Coleman, could you roll the dice on a $3,000 Ito Smith?
The issue with guys when you start to get down into this range is you have to project like an upside that can help you win the Millie Maker, and getting like 12 from Ito probably doesn't do it. So you'd probably have to score twice, which I guess could happen, but he would not be in like my core of guys. No, I don't think.
Okay, last one, running back to talk about from this below $5,000 area. Davis, you first. Mike brings up Ty Montgomery. Why not just play Aaron Jones at 43?
Yeah, I think that Aaron Jones is a defensible play given the context of this game. I'm on board with that.
Yeah, Mike, why Montgomery over Jones here? If one of them is gonna smash,
I'd play both of them at a 5 to 10% clip. I don't think I have any interest in Jamal Williams. I think I'm done with that. But I think you could play either of them. Obviously not in the same lineup, but if your idea is, hey, one of these guys is going to emerge as a smash play for Green Bay, just make 10% exposure lineups of Aaron Jones, 10% of Ty Montgomery and just make sure you're not using them in the same lineup with one another.
So do you envision yourself constructing many lineups where you go running back, and running back in the flex, or is that the spot to pay down for a late game cheap wide receiver?
I have to work through it a little bit more. Initially, I think that like from a macro level, wide receiver makes more sense in the flex, just given the PPR scoring. But from a micro level, some of these running backs you're taking them because of their PPR viability. And I see higher upside because of the roles with some of these guys. So my initial lean is actually to go heavier running back in the flex than wide receiver.
Well, the problem would become we don't love many of these running backs that are sub 5K. And if that's a spot where you're going to save some money, it feels like you're better off just saving money with a receiver this week.
Yeah, I think the problem on the week, though, is we just don't love that many plays sub 5K, regardless of position.
Davis, what would you think would be your initial lean? A cheap wide receiver, maybe a tight end in the flex, if that's what you fancy?
just the long-term math on DraftKings will say that your roster is more likely to win, first place in these large field tournaments if you have a fourth wide receiver in it. But the math will always say that. The issue is pinpointing which wide receiver that will be. Running back volume is a lot easier to pin down. We're better at projecting running back usage than we are at projecting wide receiver usage. So that's why the wide receivers normally produce higher scores, but we're less likely to know which wide receivers will do that.
Yeah. The thing I'll say, though, if you're doing game stacks, the one thing that I found working a lot this year, and it's helped people win the million makers, whether it's Deshaun Jackson week 1, Calvin Ridley week 3, is, if you're game stacking, use some of those second, third cheap wide receivers, bump them up, even if they don't project that well with whatever projection system you're using, just because if the game gets nutty, those are the type of plays that can benefit at a disproportionate amount. And that's sort of how you land on these receivers, as Davis correctly says. The hard part isn't knowing that cheap wide receivers are going to put up good scores. It's identifying them. And that's one way to make it easier to identify, is to just correlate them with the rest of your lineup.
I stacked the Houston Indianapolis game like 7 different ways last week with Ryan Grant, Chester Rogers, Will Fuller, all of them. But my best lineup was with Kiki Cutie. Not that I'm like some genius for projecting that game. It's just like the NFL teams are passing so much and running more spread formations. Like you truly do not know before the game which wide receiver will have the best games.
Yeah, my best lineup last week was a Watson lineup that had Kiki and Naheem Hines in it.
Yeah.
So
like, and those are just the sort of things that it's very, like, a projection system is very unlikely to give you that lineup. That's a call you have to make on your own.
Let's talk wide receivers then. At the top end, Davis, is there one guy that you have to have in your lineup, or again, is this a situation where you can pay up for one, maybe go down, or you're taking a very balanced approach at wide receiver?
Juju Smith-Schuster at $7,500. That's just a bad price. He's the third most targeted wide receiver in the NFL. He, if you look at his like age-related comps, basically the only one who's ever been as good as he is at as young of an age as he is Randy Moss. Falcons defense, everyone's hurt. They have no pass rush. Steelers at home. Smith-Schuster is like probably like an 80% tournament kind of play for me. Just get him in, and you get the added leverage of people who are still jamming in Antonio Brown for a more expensive price, even though their volume is like basically the same.
Yeah, Brown's second in the league in targets. Juju's third. Mike, I like Adam Thielen here, who I don't think people realize has been as good as he's been so far this year.
Yeah, the targets for Thielen have been pretty crazy. I'm just pulling up right now. He's at 12, 13, 19, and 12 targets through 4 weeks. And when you're playing with a capable quarterback and getting that volume week in and week out, and just a pretty well-run offense in general, that's a GPP play every week. I think it always makes sense to play the ownership a bit at wide receiver because it's more variant. That was one thing I was kicking myself about last week, was I had a lot of exposure to the chalkier, like Odell Beckham, Michael Thomas. As a result, I didn't get as much DeAndre Hopkins outside of, pure Watson stacks last week. And that was really what you kind of needed to win, was to get Hopkins lineups, not necessarily with Watson. And if you, chop off some exposure at the really chalky receivers up top, you'll naturally get yourself overweight on the second tier receivers that are just seeing good volume week in and week out. It's more difficult to play matchups at the wide receiver position. We try to add context there. We try to do as well as we can. But at the end of the day, the volume is really driving the receiver position, and the ownership doesn't always reflect that. But I do think Antonio Brown, if everyone goes to Juju, Antonio Brown could be.
They won't though. They won't. If the ownership from these showdown slates has anything to say about it, people are still jamming in Antonio Brown over other options in these showdown slates, despite how it hampers the rest of your roster. And despite these are island games, people are seeing how much better Smith-Schuster is athletically than Brown at this point, and they're still taking them.
Yeah, I mean, we still have Brown projecting really well, even adjusting for the volume. I mean, you hate to throw the small sample size, but it's been 4 weeks as this guy that's been the number one wide receiver for years. You're not having Juju out project him overall, are you?
I would say that Juju Smith-Schuster, even disregarding anything that's happened from the first 4 weeks, you give me the next 12 weeks, I would bet on him having a greater yards per target than Brown does the rest of the way, even if Brown does get more of the volume tilted back in his favor.
That was the biggest cop out. What is that? Great.
I'm saying that Smith-Schuster is a better NFL football player than Brown is right now, and if I'm getting this discount on him, I will continue to play him even if public opinion holds that Brown is the undisputed number one wide receiver in fantasy, which I do not think.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think if public opinion holds, it's even more reason to smash him because he is a really good play. I think public opinion could reverse.
I mean, the public opinion it takes a season. It takes a season for people to come away from this idea. Everyone just came off an offseason of drafting Antonio Brown as the 4th or 5th overall pick. Ownership, more people will have AB.
In general, though, a lot of people could flock to this game and they could both be highly owned. And if that's the case, I wonder if AJ Green at 7,200 gets left behind a little bit. And I think that's a phenomenal price tag for him, especially.
Adams at 7,600 too.
You've got Eifert out, and that can only, unless you're making the argument that Green would see more attention, but I don't think that follows through too much. I do think you see a little bit more upside in the touchdown department for Green, just because the way Eifert is used.
Well, I mean, in both those situations, Adams could end up seeing Slay if he's healthy. AJ Green can end up seeing Xavier Howard if he's healthy. The name that no one kind of brought up, and maybe no one wants to play him anymore, maybe that makes him the tournament play. Everyone's stacking that Falcons-Steelers game, and I have my doubts that people are going to pay up for Julio.
Oh, they won't. And you're right. You're totally right, Pat. Julio is actually the best play at the wide receiver position, and it was dumb of me to go to Juju first.
Julio is the kind of like how you said Christian McCaffrey, Davis, where the touchdowns haven't been there, so they're not priced in at all. And I know all this nonsense about how he can't find the end zone, blah, blah, blah.
Never Julio.
I just think, most of that's nonsense. There's a little bit of it there. If you look at his expected touchdown rates over his career, it's his actual touchdown rates are a little bit lower, but not substantially so. And when you got a guy that's getting so many yards, the touchdowns are going to follow. So there's a huge game incoming from him. But the difficult part about this conversation is I generally like to spread it out among these expensive receivers just because of the variance of it. But on this week, I don't know if I have enough total exposure to devote to expensive receivers to justify spreading it out because it's just probably not the right way to build. I think I'll end up with a lot more of the 7K-ish receivers than getting up to Julio Brown just because the way the builds work. And I don't know if the market will follow that or they'll try and jam Julio, they'll try and jam Antonio Brown and go with some really cheap, risky plays elsewhere.
Okay, who is the better Falcons receiver value this week? Is it Julio at 86? Is it Calvin Ridley in the upper 5,000s? Or is it Mohamed Sanu at 4,000?
Definitely not Ridley.
It's Mohamed Sanu, right?
I mean, Julio Jones is still per dollar value, even at 80. It's like he's the best one, but Sanu has been frustrating because he hasn't found the end zone. And I've been using him the last 2 weeks when Ridley's gone off. I think my highest scoring team last week was actually a Sanu Ridley lineup where Sanu put up a whole, but I don't see a big gap between Sanu and Ridley right now. Maybe I'm crazy, but in terms of overall projection, I don't think there's a huge gap unless you just really feel that Ridley's touchdown rate. I mean, obviously, he's not going to continue doing what he's doing like Will Fuller did last year. But if you do think that he has a substantially higher touchdown rate than Mohamed Sanu, maybe that's how you get there with Ridley. But in terms of overall volume, I mean, Ridley saw 3 targets last week. I don't think there's a lot to distinguish Ridley from Sanu. And I mean, the talent's probably better given their ages and profiles and whatnot. But the volume's so close that give me the cheaper receiver of the two.
Yeah, but you even mentioned this, that when you look back at like Millionaire Maker winning lineups from a few, like the first 4 weeks of the season, you had that game with Fitzmagic and then Deshaun Jackson. You had the Matt Ryan game when everyone stacked him with Julio and it was Calvin Ridley who went off. If people are going to be using Matt Ryan this week and they're stacking that game, doesn't Sanu seem like the logical piece?
Yeah, I think Sanu makes a ton of sense. And it makes it easier to fit in a Pittsburgh player coming back because everyone else is expensive in this game. And we've been talking about the cap is tight this week. So to get a 4K guy that fits well in terms of a correlation play with what you're trying to do, but still allows you to play, Connor coming back or Juju coming back, whatever it is, I think makes a lot of sense. And the Pittsburgh offense is so concentrated that you could run, 2 of those 3 guys pretty easily in a lineup, even if it's a Ryan lineup. I mean, I'd rather do it in a Ben lineup, but even if you want like Ryan, Sanu, Hooper or something, you want to go the cheap Atlanta stack, like you can afford 2 of those Pittsburgh pieces coming back.
Davis, we saw this last week. People were just nutso playing like, hey, you know who's going to be a great play this week? Eli Manning. That game is going to shoot out. And then all of a sudden, Breeze is outdoors. They can't convert at the same rate they do at home on the fast turf. Ted Ginn is a non.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me. I ended up with a lot of Breeze because I'm a dumb idiot.
Ted Ginn they don't use, like, he is just not as fast when he's off the turf. So it takes that element out of their offense as big plays. But now we've seen Atlanta, they played 1 game outdoors this year and they didn't look great. They couldn't convert when they got into the red zone. And maybe that's where their advantage comes when they're constantly playing inside. But what are the chances that this just isn't a super high scoring game? Like it's, I don't know, like 21-20 instead of 49-50, like, some people are talking about.
I mean, it's possible.
These are more likely it's 21-20 than one of those super high scoring games. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, but these are just bad defenses. And another thing is both of these teams are not afraid to completely abandon running the football. And that's like the number one thing that correlates with more points is when if you just pass more plays, more catches, more fantasy points, more points on the board. And that's like, so if you're looking at like, betting totals or whatever, or projecting games to go over, you want to look at teams that are fine just not running the ball. And both of these teams will do that. So I certainly think these pieces are still really good. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted to just stone fade this game, like if you wanted to be mega ultra contrarian, you could just stone fade that game, think that there's like a 11% chance no one from the game hits like their GPP value, and just go this Detroit Green Bay game up and down. Just play guys at every position from that game.
Yeah, well, this is what I was thinking. I mean, I don't think I really want to like just stone fade this game, but I think it's going to make some of these other stacks and other receivers go severely under-owned. Like, Mike, what do you make of the Rams? Like, is there a way to get those guys in your lineup? The Chargers against Oakland is another good spot, and these are confusing to deal with because you're going to inevitably pick the wrong piece a lot of the time. But is there a way to attack those games? Like, we're talking about Eckler and Melvin Gordon. What if it's just a pass-heavy game? It's a Keenan Allen game.
Yeah, Keenan Allen's kind of in that Hopkins mold from last week where I think he's a guy you want exposure to just purely based on the volume that, he might not pop as high as the top 3 at the position. So, and the price tag's I think it's a little bit easier to get. Well, he's 8K, so it's not that much easier to get him in from Julio and from Antonio Brown. But in general, I think, if you just go a little bit more balanced at the position, and then you don't have to use a lot of these sub 5K guys that we keep referencing, I think that might be the way to go. Like, you've got Jarvis Landry in there. Davis mentioned Devontae Adams in that 7K range. The guy I liked was AJ Green in the low 7K range. I think you can go like mid-high tier even a little bit more than trying to find the right, really expensive receiver to use.
If Randall Cobb is out and Geronimo Allison sits, are you going to play Valdez Scantling at $3,300 as the ultimate salary cap relief and just go with it?
Probably, yeah.
I think I am too. Mike?
I mean, he's the guy that it seems is like clearly ahead of trio of rookie receivers they have. I mean, he's clearly the lead, and somebody else has to see the targets if those two guys sit. So
Allison had 11 targets in.
But dude, that's if
game.
both those guys sit, that's the Montgomery game. If both those guys sit, like
it's Montgomery. I mean, Montgomery probably moves back to the slot, and Aaron Jones is probably just like a 70% playing time running back, like for real.
Dude, you could play both of them together, honestly, if both Allison and Cobb are out.
Yeah.
Okay. Keelan Cole is $4,900. D.D. Westbrook is $4,700. Dante Moncrief is $4,100. It seems like one of these guys is going to go crazy against the Chiefs. Which one's it going to be?
Every week I make D.D. Westbrook teams. He's very good. He's very, very good at football.
Mike?
I mean, I'll go Keelan Cole. I just feel safest with him of the bunch. I mean, I know we're looking for upside, but as far as getting the opportunities,
they're all like, honestly, they all have arguments for, like, Cole has had good volume for the longest in this offense. Westbrook has looked the most athletic, and Moncrief has the most air yards.
Yeah, I guess I'd go Moncrief just because historically he's got a pretty good TD rate. I know some of that's because of how he was used, with the Colts and with Luck, but between the air yards and the historical TD rate, I feel like he actually might be the higher ceiling play to use.
He plays the worst position in that offense, though. He plays the flanker, and so he's just like, he's running all these routes where he's on an island against a cornerback every time.
Dude, but if we're talking, the sub 5K range, Davis is hitting on this Green Bay Detroit game. I think Marvin Jones.
Yeah, Marvin Jones is welcome to Marvin Jones Ultra Chalk Week.
I think he's ultra chalk.
If he's ultra chalk, I'm not playing him.
Yeah, he's gonna be.
That's a bad ultra chalk play. That's everyone sub 5K gets spread out, and he's the one I like the most type play. But that's not I'm gonna eat 15 to 20% chalk type play.
Now, I feel pretty confident that he will be in every optimal lineup from whatever fantasy website you subscribe to.
I mean, I think people should subscribe to dailyroto.com after using the promo code THEPME to get yourself 10% off. That is the way that I would do it. Listen to this. If I put in 3 receivers into my 3 wide receiver spots, one of them is Valdez-Scantling, one of them is Mohamed Sanu, and the other one's Tywan Taylor, I got a lot of money left over to build a super team.
Yeah, that's when you can start smashing some of those expensive running backs or like Julio in the flex. But the chances that one of those receivers like completely duds is pretty high.
It is, but like, give me the case. Like, you can make a legitimate case for all 3 of those guys having pretty good weeks.
Yeah.
Yes, I just wouldn't use them all in the same lineup together. I just don't think you're going to hit at a high enough rate to actually win a GPP with all 3 together.
Well, I mean, in order to win the GPP, I would need all 3 of them to go off. So if one of them has like a mediocre game, who cares? I wasn't going to win anyway.
He's more saying that the risk profile is to build a lineup you like and then like sub those guys in, like mix and match them.
Okay. Right. Rotate through those guys, even 2 of them if you want. But I think just with the way the pricing is this week, like they're not that good of plays though. Like they're all plays where you can see why you would use them as your 1 cheap guy or your 2 cheap guys. They're not, oh my God, we should be smashing these 3 cheap guys in the same lineup. So we can do whatever we want elsewhere. Okay, see, those are the 3 kind of cheapos that I do like. But in terms of Tywan Taylor, Mike, you can probably speak to this because you're a masochist and just watch every Bills game. But doesn't Corey Davis just get shut down by Tre'Davious White, and then Tywan Taylor's there playing all of these snaps now, lining up to have like 12 targets? Yeah, until the Titans just run the ball 100 times because they're up 30-0 after. Well, I mean, that's fine. If they get up 30-0, I'll take my chances with the guy who could be the best receiver on this team. No, I think Taylor's fine. He's what I like with Taylor is the way he's used. You've got kind of like a combination of these big upside type plays, these high variance type plays with these shorter, like screen type, small passes type plays. Kind of reminds me of Taylor Gabriel a little bit. Yeah, a little. I was going to say same thing. So I'm glad because you're a little bit better at those types of comparisons than me. So I'm not way off base there. I mean, he's not as fast. Yeah, but in general, how they use him, like that combination of targets, I think is really strong. Yeah, it's just a game that I could see being slow paced. The Bills' secondary overall isn't bad. I know Tre'Davious White's obviously the most important piece, and the idea is that he shuts down Corey Davis, and the corner on the other side is a little bit weaker, but they're still pretty strong at the safety positions and whatnot. So I think the secondary overall is decent. I think it's a fine play. I just don't think it's a smash play. It could definitely go wrong if he gets like 14% of the team's targets and doesn't connect on a big play. I mean, even last week he had a really good game, but no one was even coming close to winning GPPs with it.
No, but if you're going to take guys down in this range, if you're going to play these guys every single week, then you're hoping for the one or two big spike games and they correlate with the rest of your lineup. Like, he feels to me like a guy that's going to have 2 or 3 really gigantic games this year.
Yeah, look, I'm going to use him. I'm just saying I don't have the confidence I think that you do in like these trio of cheap guys. It's more like I'm going to play like 8 cheap guys, and the 3 guys you mentioned are going to be within those 8 cheap guys I play, but I'm just going to rotate through them. A couple other guys too I'm interested in following, like the injury report on Larry Fitzgerald throughout the week. He's only 4,700. If he stays on the injury report and is banged up, Christian Kirk at 3,700. I just think this Arizona offense, one of these weeks, is just going to be somewhat competent. I like the way Josh Rosen looked last week, even though it didn't show up in the box score. And I just don't think that this pass coverage unit for the Niners is any good. I think looking at like the Pro Football Focus team grades, they're one of, let's see, in pass coverage, they are currently 30th out of 32 teams. So I think that's an interesting spot to take some chances on too.
We haven't even mentioned the best guy.
Who's the best guy?
If Watkins misses, it's one of the Chiefs guys, whether it be DeAnthony Thomas or Conley. One of them is like going to be projected to be in an amazing role with the best quarterback in football, and is going to be close to the dead man.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would lean Conley, but I think everyone would have that idea. The one problem with the Chiefs offense is it feels like one guy is one or two of the guys that you want to play. It's the problem with the Kelsey price tag. I know that he's been priced down, but you could convince me that he ends up with 2 catches and does nothing, and they still score 35 points.
Right, but we're not asking you to play Tyreek Hill for whatever his price tag is.
I mean, we talked about these tournament plays at the top with Julio. Isn't Tyreek Hill the tournament play again as well? Like, no one's playing him.
It's totally binary with him. Like, either you're faster than Jalen Ramsey on 2 plays or you're not, and he probably has the ability to get past him twice. So it's just like if they connect on both of the times that he beats Ramsey off the line of scrimmage, it's GG's. Like, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns.
And if Watkins is out, you wonder if they scheme some, kind of like shorter type routes to him to get him open, like on screen passes and whatnot, just to get him some touches. And then you sort of combine those like base cheapo catches with.
I actually really think that DeAnthony Thomas is going to get like 9 touches in this game if Watkins misses, like for real. Like he would be their version of Taylor.
He's the play. Then that would make him the play then.
Yeah, I mean, DeAnthony Thomas is not very good, is the issue. Like, he's like a very inefficient football player, but he does the sort of things that coaches value in that gadget role. And he's fast enough like Watkins is. But, I mean, I will definitely be if Watkins does not play in this game, I will be rotating Chiefs secondary wide receivers in tournaments for sure.
Okay, Mike, you brought up the idea of balance a little bit earlier, and frankly, the balance way is always the contrarian way to build, even in tournaments, because people want to have one of these very, very top-end guys. And you can still squeeze one of them in. You just can't have all of them and end up with a shitty wide receiving core like I just mentioned, if that's the way that you want to go with it. So who are the balance receivers? I'm looking at it right now. Like Cooper Kupp seems like pretty good at 6,300. Just all these Rams receivers, they never like project out well, but they're always good. And Cooper Kupp just scoring a ton of touchdowns right now.
It's hard because the price tags have come up a little bit on them, but I think both Kupp and Robert Woods is the one that I would want to use. Sure. The volume profile for Woods has been insane. So I run this report each week where I look at the air yards and kind of the yard lines of where the targets come from to get just an idea of like expected rates for players in terms of yards per target and touchdown rates, just because, not just the overall opportunity, but the types of opportunity that you're getting. And Robert Woods just rates incredibly well in both expected yards per target, pretty okay in catch rate, but then really well again in touchdown rate. And then we know the overall volume has been there for him. And I did a little, mini video on Twitter last week just talking about how concentrated this offense is, that you generally just want to go the cheaper parts, because between Gurley, Cup, Cooks, and Woods, you're talking 90% of the team's targets. And unlike a lot of other teams, when it gets into the red zone, that doesn't really change. We don't have these
they don't bring
sky-high
in a
TD
second
rates
tight
for
end.
tight ends. Yeah, like a lot of teams, you get these sky-high TD rates for tight ends because they don't see a whole lot of targets, but when they do, they're really, likely to score on them. You don't see that. So as a result, the touchdown rates on all the Rams receivers are a lot higher than they are for, most of their peers at the position. So I think that's fine. I like Robert Woods a lot. The guy I love is Doug Baldwin. 7 targets back from.
Let's go, Dougie B.
I just think he's a really talented receiver, and that this price tag on him is way too low. Talk about volume being the most important thing. If you think volume is the most important thing and you're not playing Doug Baldwin this week, unless you just really think he's not healthy, I just don't understand what you're doing.
Well, you can even make the case, too, that this lines up perfectly for him in this matchup, unless Russell Wilson's just on his back the entire game and has no time to throw, because you're looking at Doug Baldwin, likely going to play out of the slot, meaning he's going to be matched up over the middle with the weakest part of this Rams offense. Peters is still banged up, but playing. Talib is out. I think that there is a path for him here to see double-digit targets, and if he is healthy, and like you mentioned, the 7 targets last week do go a long way to showing, hey, that was his first week back. He can probably grow on that this week, and I'm not convinced that this Rams defense isn't going to start giving up like 25 points per game either.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the exact matchup that Cooper Kupp destroyed last week. I know everybody went off on the Rams, but Kupp especially. So,
whoa, you can say,
I don't know, Davis. I know you're like very anti-Seattle.
Hold on a second. Are you confusing Cooper Kupp with Adam Thielen?
Yeah,
you're a racist.
I just totally flipped those two.
I'm going to say Cooper Kupp, of course he's going to play well against his own team. He knows all their plays.
Cooper Kupp destroying his own defense. You should have seen him in 7-on-7 drills, Mayo.
So I like Baldwin. Are you in on Baldwin, Davis?
No, Baldwin's just like the perfect example of a guy that I don't play while everyone else does play. He is old. He's injured. He's got an offensive coordinator that continues to call run plays at the highest clip in the league when you adjust for game script. The offensive line is horrible. His quarterback's not running. They are playing like everything about that Seattle situation just screams like I don't want any pieces from that. And also Tyler Lockett is, at this point in their careers, he's like a more athletic player. He's more likely to be open. He's more likely to get plays called for him, which has not been true in the past in Baldwin's career. And Lockett has, earned that trust from Russell Wilson this year. I just kind of make it a rule to like not invest in teams that I just think are not going to be able to put points on the board. And I think that that's a very real situation for Seattle. And it's not Russell Wilson's fault. It's just Schottenheimer is the worst offensive play caller of the 32 teams.
All right, I'm going to go with Baldwin. I'm going to be on Team Mike with this one. The other guys around there, I mentioned Cooper Kupp. I like Cooper Kupp. I like John Brown because I still think that when the Browns deploy Denzel Ward, they'll probably end up putting him on Michael Crabtree, which is probably a mistake. But hey, good news for us. John Brown's just a weird price this week that he'll end up getting overlooked. And the last guy is just Tyler Boyd. Even with the price increase, if Xavier Howard can just limit A.J. Green, it's going to be a bonanza for Tyler Boyd, Mike.
Yeah, I think that, the Boyd target share has become more certain. We've seen that he's obviously a very skilled receiver and that John Ross just really isn't a challenger for meaningful targets there. So I think he's an okay play with the price bump. I think Devin Funchess, Quincy Enunwa for a little bit cheaper are targets that probably carry less ownership just because Boyd's been so productive for people 2 weeks in a row that you can get, the volume for Enunwa. You've got just the upside and just pure amount of catches.
I can get behind you with little Quincy. No thanks for Funches for me. That's the one thing the Giants have been able to do is limit number one wide receivers. That's the only thing they can do on defense.
What do you think, Davis? Any Funches?
I would rather play Funches than Doug Baldwin.
That's ludicrous.
That is a little ludicrous.
Just like, why are you trying to play a 30-year-old who's hurt and whose offensive coordinator says they need to run more? Like, it does not make sense to me.
Because Doug Baldwin's good. That's why. This really strikes.
How many targets do you think Baldwin gets, and how many targets would he need for you to play him?
I think his median projection is probably like 8.5. And while that's a good,
Eight and a half.
that's like a
median
good
target
projection.
100.
That's like a good projection for his salary, but I think his floor is much lower than that. And I don't think his ceiling is old Doug Baldwin 32 DraftKings points ceiling.
Dude, I'll play anybody at 5K if you're giving me 8.5 targets.
But I think I think Boyd's median projection, and that could be high. I'm like not always great at this, like speaking off the top of the cuff, because I don't do my own projections. I work off of other people's. But I would smash in.
I like how you
Boyd.
combined off the cuff with top of the head.
You're right. I would rather have Boyd. I would rather have Anunwa. I would rather have Funchess. In tournaments, I would definitely rather have Westbrook in this matchup. I think I would rather have Marvin Jones in cash because he'll be so overwhelmingly popular. Like I think there are a lot of viable, and Baldwin for me is the profile of a guy I don't play guys like that. And that's not even to say like you guys should tail me. It's just that's how I play the game. I don't play guys who I think have a lot of negative things going for them.
Yeah, this sounds.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. Like I played McCoy, as a GPP play, and it just flamed out completely. So I think that's fair, but I also think like you're understanding that risk when you're taking the player. And
yeah, I understand that zeroing him out of my player pool means that if he has a 12 target game, then I'm probably going to get crushed because I think he will be like owned.
This is really reminding me. I did a draft one time in New York, and for whatever reason, Michael Salfino stood behind me the entire time to criticize each of my picks. And he just had this big rant for 5 minutes after I took Antonio Brown like 4 years ago, that Antonio Brown sucks because he's too short. And this Doug Baldwin being too old thing is kind of crazy. The guy's 30.
I mean, it's more, he's very
Baldwin. I talked about looking at those like expected receiving rates. I did that last year for all the players that had like at least 50 targets, and then like looking at their careers. And Doug Baldwin made the top 5 lists in catch rate over expected, touchdown rate over expected, yards per target over expected, top 5 in all of those lists of players that saw, 50 plus targets last year. So he's been really, really good over his career. If you want to argue, he's not healthy and he's declined, maybe that's the case, but he's been an awesome wide receiver over the course of his career, not just based on opportunity, what he's done with the opportunities he's been given.
Quarterbacks. Is there a reason to just say, you know what, I'm playing Ben, I'm playing Matt Ryan, and those are the 2 guys that I'm going with? Or are you going to become, it's funny, I read an article this morning, it's like, here are some under-the-radar plays. Blake Bortles. I don't think he's going under the radar this week.
I mean, quarterback ownership percentages in these tournaments is always so flat, like a massive, massive, massive chalk quarterback. And the Millionaire Maker is like, what, 18%, Mike? That would be like insanely high for a quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, it just gets
it's
spread
just
out.
Like you play that you think
it's a onesie position. And at the quarterback position, like, I mean, how many are really just completely not viable on a week? Like
10.
Even if half of them you say are viable in some fashion on the week, I mean, you start doing the math and it's hard to get anyone at like mega chalk unless the pricing is just egregious.
So who are the top plays at quarterback then? Because I'm looking down at Bortles, and that's a great way to save some money. Derek Carr is probably another decent way to save some money too if you really wanted to at 5,100. Russell Wilson is 5,100. That just seems kind of crazy knowing what we know about Russell Wilson. But based on the way that he's looked this year and the fact that he's not running, that's not a great thing. I'm just curious. Do you think people will play Mahomes or not, Davis? Because I kind of want to play him.
Yeah, people will probably play him. I'm probably one of those people. Like I am always team a good offense beats a good defense. That's even more so true this year as the rules have changed. It's just much harder for a defense to really take control of a game. What I do think the Jaguars will be able to do is force Kansas City to play a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, but I don't even necessarily know if that's an advantage for the Jaguars because the Chiefs have so many fast players. 6,200 just feels like way too big of a dynamic pricing shift. Like it just feels like he should be more like 6,700. Like I don't know. I'm playing Mahomes.
Mike?
What do you think, Mike?
We've got him as the 5th overall projected quarterback on the week. And the pricing on DK with the quarterbacks, when you start getting scrunched in the low 6,000s, that's playable for a top 5 quarterback, even though you'd expect, some regression just overall for Mahomes, and it's a difficult matchup. But 6,200 with the stackability of Kansas City, like that's someone that'll still be a part of my mix. And I'm interested to see, what some ownership projections are. We have, Unsourced Fantasy Collective does the ownership projections for us on Daily Roto, which can help decide on some of these GPP pivot type plays. But I do think enough people will see Jacksonville that Mahomes isn't chalk. And as long as he's not chalk, it's difficult to argue with the ceiling that we've seen from the Kansas City offense in general. So
he's got to
I'll
have
play him, but he's not like, I'm not as high on him as Davis. Like he's not one of my first three quarterbacks in. He's probably one of, as I make stacks 4 through 7, he makes that cut.
Could you go Kirk Cousins against the Eagles with their propensity to give up giant plays this year, and knowing that Dalvin Cook's banged up, Murray hasn't looked good, and they might just end up abandoning the run game pretty quickly? And this is such a concentrated offense. I know we saw Lord Eldrick with 2 touchdowns. We saw Treadwell do some work, but primarily this is going to be Diggs, this is going to be Thielen, this is going to be Kirk Cousins. I tried this with the Bills a few weeks ago when no one was taking that stack, and let me tell you, it did not go well. But this is a game where they should continue to have to throw the entire time, and it feels like big plays are going to be available, Mike.
I think any offense that is concentrated enough with highly talented players, you can stack weekly regardless of the matchup. I think sometimes we try and get too fine with what we're doing, but the Rams, you can stack them every week. The Vikings, I think, are one of these options. I know the week that that they went absolutely off versus Green Bay, like I was lamenting before roster lock, I was like, I don't have any Minnesota stacks, and it's because Cousins rate projected okay, Diggs projected okay, Thielen projected okay, and it just didn't get me on any of those guys. But I think week in and week out, the difficult part is like, do they make your cut? I think they're definitely viable each week. Do they make the cut? I don't know. This week they're probably on the periphery for me. I couldn't argue against it, but for me, the quarterback I like the most going with Doug Ball, I like Russ Wilson at $5,100. I think that's too cheap. I do think that maybe based off what Davis has said, that we might be over projecting early on their pass run ratio because they've been so pass heavy the last few seasons, and this year they haven't been. But it is a game where they just might not have any choice but to throw. And I know garbage time itself is a myth, but volume in garbage time is not a myth. And when you think that the offense can produce in a script where they have to throw the ball quite a bit, then that is something to target.
Davis, should we just play Cam Newton and get on with it?
Yeah, I mean that's another thing. It's just like Cam Newton is definitely underpriced, and he's running this year. He's being used in like all these optimal ways. Like he's got 2 games now with double-digit rushing attempts, and it's just hard to say how much, like, that just really raises both the quarterback's floor and a ceiling. And like that's while we're on this subject, that's a big reason why the Seahawks look so horrible on offense right now, is they're not calling any designed runs for Wilson at all. Like he's just not being used as a runner. So yeah, Cam as like a core GPP quarterback, 100%. And you can do naked Cam. Obviously, you do not have to stack him with any of his wide receiving options at all.
So, Mike, if it's going to be you and you're going to like build the majority of your how many lineups do you think you're going to play this week?
So I'll probably I love the the $9 slant tournament versus I might play some in the Million Maker too, and I usually max that out, so it's 150. So that's kind of the perspective that I'm coming from.
So how many quarterback like combinations do you usually use? Like how many in a 150 player pool?
Yeah.
How many quarterbacks do you use? 10, 5?
I try to go like 6 to 10. Lately, I've been trying to squeeze it down just because I think there's a lot of upside in getting diversity in the stacks that you do choose to use. Like last week, I had a lot of Trubisky Bears, but if I had even more, and of course you can make the argument if I cut down my stacks, maybe they wouldn't have made the cut and I wouldn't have had any. But if I had even more, the ones I did have, I had like too much Tampa Bay coming back and it totally killed them. Whereas if I extended the amount of stacks I made, maybe I have the Trubisky Gabriel without any Tampa Bay coming back, even boosting those players. So I'm torn exactly how I want to do it, but somewhere between 6 to 10. I think once you get past 10, even in a 150 run, it's too much.
Davis,
I want at least 10 to 20 stacks for each of my quarterbacks.
All right, so Davis, how about you? How many lineups do you think you'll end up playing this week? Because I think I'm only going to play 10.
I normally play in between 8 and 12 lineups. Like I go through and I enter. So the slant that Michael mentioned is I normally put 5 teams in that. But then what I'll do after that is I'll just start hand making teams for the $12 single entry on DraftKings. I forget what they call it, but they repost it a lot on Sunday morning because it fills, and then they post another one. And I just kind of continually make teams for that until I feel like I have all the exposures set out that I want.
So,
and I will I'll probably only play like 5 quarterbacks.
See, I was thinking about playing 10, and I had a lot of success with this last week because mainly I picked right on Houston and Indianapolis. I think the other one I used was Ryan Tannehill, so that did not work out so well. Those lineups, not very hot. But I think I'm just going to use 3. Just use 3 quarterbacks, 10 lineups, use 4, 3, 3, or even 5, 3, and 2, and be on my way. So if I was whittling it down to that, Mike, and I had to use 3 quarterbacks across 10 lineups, what 3 do you think are the 3 to go with? Like, is Cam the one just to put in with 5 lineups for me, at least?
We've got Cam with our highest 90th percentile projection, highest 95th percentile projection. So I think you have to. The hard part with Cam is always deciding, do you want to stack with him or not? Because you do have options with Funchess, with Christian McCaffrey, but at the same time, some of the reason why his ceiling is so high is because of the rushing touchdowns. And if he gets those, stacking him with someone might actually cap your upside. So that's always the difficulty I have with Cam. But I think ultimately he would make the cut. I really like Aaron Rodgers as from a ceiling perspective, and just hope that, Roethlisberger carries more of the ownership, some of these other guys we're talking about. And then I can't go against the Russ value. So I guess those 3 guys would be my top 3. Cam, Russ, Rodgers.
I'm thinking Cam, Mahomes, and maybe Goff for me. But there was one other name I wanted to throw in there just because of the pace of play that we've talked about a little bit. And I just think there's going to be so many plays run in that game. This team is so pass heavy. And I mean, for 2 of the past 3 games, the guy's thrown for almost 400 yards. He's averaging like 49 pass attempts a game. Davis, what about Joe Flacco?
Oh, I thought you were going to say Matt Stafford, who rates out as a really good value based on the stuff that I'm looking at.
I got thoughts on that game. We'll get to it when we get to defenses, but like all the Ravens offense looks great, by the way. No good players, mind you, but just the way that they're scheming and just throwing so many different things.
No, they have all the best tight ends in the league.
And now they have Hayden Hurst coming back.
Yeah, I think Flacco seems fine. Generally, I do like to get a little bit of rushing upside with my quarterbacks, which is why, like, when I come on these shows, I tend to be like Cam, Mahomes, like Rodgers, like guys who can get you 2 to 4 points with their legs. I generally like those guys.
Flacco randomly have a bunch of rushing touchdowns last year. I mean, just randomly.
I mean, I think maybe 2 years ago. I'll go look it up on PFR right now, but I know he did get like the 1 yard touchdown.
I just remember being tilted by it, like big time. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I have bad memories of him like stealing touchdowns from skill players.
I think you can just pair him up with John Brown and be on your way. It's a pretty cheap stack that you can get exposure to a game that should run a lot of plays. You probably get the 2 best pieces of that offense. Obviously, we know the Collins situation isn't great. Buck Allen's not going to score on every single 1 yard run that he ends up having. I don't know. It's a way to free up a lot of salary cap with 2 guys that have pretty good ceilings, I think, and that no one's going to use.
Yeah, I don't think I'll have that. I don't hate it, but it just I don't see that making my cut. Like I want either insane individual upside, like I think you get with Cam, or I want a ton of stackability. And I know you can pair him with Brown, and it's okay. If Brown was a bit cheaper, maybe I'd be more on that. I just don't see how that makes its way into your top 3 quarterbacks for the week. So I would vote for you to exclude Mayo.
Okay, I will put some more thought process into that one of who my third.
No one asked, but my 3 quarterbacks would be Roethlisberger, Mahomes, and Stafford. Those would be the guys, or not Stafford, Cam, Mahomes, Roethlisberger.
Okay, let's talk tight ends very briefly. Who are the ones to play, Mike?
Travis Kelce, 6K. I mean, that's just too good of a price tag. That really, if you want to build that contrarian balanced lineup in GPPs, Travis Kelce is the way to do it. But as far as cheap guys, I was talking to you guys before the show, but I'm just a sucker for David Njoku. I feel like I'm just going to play him every week until he hits, especially with Baker in there and the offense looking, pretty not just competent, but above average. And he's too cheap, I think, for his athletic profile, for the amount of targets he's getting. So I'll just keep playing him week in and week out, and it will hit eventually.
I'm just going to run through all these cheap guys. It's a week to save money. I'm going to play Vance, I'm going to play Njoku, and I'm going to play Hooper, and just hope one of those guys goes bananas. Davis?
I really like Njoku. I also really like the Cincinnati fill-in tight ends, CJ Uzoma. We can't quite agree on a pronunciation for his name, but
I'm pretty sure it's Uzama.
Uzoma. There we go.
Dude, even I had that one right.
Yeah,
all right.
Say.
Well,
I mean,
CJ...
you clearly did not watch enough of like early 90s WWF when all like the Samoan dudes were super huge. Then you'd have a lockdown on these pronunciations.
Was not my game, but he's ran more routes than Croft has thus far. This is a valuable role inside an offense that I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. The Bengals are like pretty close to a top 5 offense in terms of efficiency in the NFL right now. Dalton playing super well. The running game, they're not relying on it too much. Gio's played well. Walton looked good. Mixon, actually, I just saw a report as we were on air that he's coming back this week. Bill Lazor calling very good plays. I think that if Eifert was 2,900, we'd probably be lock buttoning him, and I think they'll play a very similar role.
I mean, Eifert's one better, and two, there would be a lot more certainty in the volume.
I mean, sure, I'm not saying he's a lock. I actually like your idea of just playing Njoku because I'm like a Baker believer, and I know that there's like a massive Njoku game coming, and also Antonio Callaway just is like, man, he is really inefficient. He makes mistakes like every game, like glaring mistakes that coaches hate. They're already talking about scaling back his playing time, which would shift targets to Njoku, I would think.
Yeah, I like Landry in that. I mean, we didn't talk about it, receiver, but God, there's a lot of cheap tight ends that you could make arguments for because and at the end of the day, it kind of ends up like who gets the touchdown. Like, so I guess you're trying to find the guys that have like legitimate upside outside of just finding the end zone.
Are you though? Like, I mean, if that's the case, then Vance McDonald's probably the play. He seems to be ingrained in the
Vance
offense.
Is smashing.
Like, you hope and he has the ability to break big ones. He's sort of like the cheaper Kittle right now, and he might actually even be better than Kittle on a week-to-week basis. But if you're going to go down this low, it's basically touchdown or bust. Like, the only other one I would consider putting in, only because they've been bad against tight ends so far, and they're really devoid of all other options, and he's $2,700, would be Rhett Ellison filling in for Evan Ingram.
Yeah, I mean, I might continue to ride some of this Jared Cook wave, too.
Yeah,
I got no problem with
Have
that.
fun with that, Jared Cook. Stupid.
But
Jared
if
Cook.
we're talking about Green Bay being banged up, like you could onslaught Green Bay if Cobb and Allison are out. Like you could play 3 Green Bay skill players, I think, potentially, with Jimmy Graham being one of them.
Well, the one thing I'll say about Jared Cook, despite the fact that I hate his guts and I never play him, but the Chargers are the best team against tight ends.
Yeah, I mean that can be a little bit
legitimate. They have a legitimate tight end erasing safety, which not a lot of teams have.
True.
So
Derwin James is the man.
That would be my hesitation outside of my normal reservations that I have that Jared Cook will just score 0 points.
I guess of the cheap guys you mentioned, Mayo, though, like Hooper is the guy I seem to like to play a lot just because I think the offense is pretty good, and he's someone that the total volume's never that good, but he, historically has really strong yards per target relative to the rest of the position, good TD rate. So I think Hooper's my favorite of those, 3K or less tight ends.
Defenses.
Why aren't you touting Nick Vannett, Leone? If you're all in on the Seahawks?
Because I mean, like Disley's still there. Like,
no,
I don't know.
I think Disley's hurt.
Disley's done, man. He's done for like 3 years. Like he's never walking again.
Oh, okay. Well, then Vannett is probably gonna end up popping $2,500, baby. Just roll Seattle.
All right.
Brian Schottenheimer really is just like totally popping in the Daily Roto Optimals.
No, I think he's ruining it because his play calling's been so drastically different.
There was this quote. There was this quote from him about how like they had like too many long passing plays and they needed to dial it back. Like they were trying to gain too many yards.
Let's talk.
Let's
just talk defenses, because this is really where the only thing I can really contribute to the show comes through. Play the Lions, $2,200. Boom, be a millionaire maker winner.
Sure, seems fine. Rodgers playing Gimpy.
Rodgers, Gimpy, bad O-line. Detroit has the second best pass rush in the league per adjusted sack rate. Like, no one's seeing it. And no one will use them because no one wants to play anyone ever going up against Aaron Rodgers.
I played the Redskins that week when they were the dead men against them at home. They got like 9.
Like, if you're
the thing is, Green Bay throws a lot, so that's where you get sacks and interceptions. Like, things just happen, and then points can be somewhat variant, and it just doesn't contribute a lot to the scoring except on like the very extreme ends.
The only other one I would really think about, because I mean we're kind of talking like you gotta save money this week, so it's hard to pay up for Les Titans at $4,000. It's hard to pay up for the Rams at 38. You can probably squeeze the Panthers in at 33. I think they're a good play as well. But the other one for me would probably be the Cardinals at $2,900.
I really like the Browns. That's a defense that's playing super well, and against an immobile quarterback that takes sacks.
I feel like there's a lot of cheap defense, like the Bills home versus Mariota, who's still banged up. Like they're $2,300. That's fine.
Dude, just like give it up, man. The Bills.
Dude, the Bills were like the highest scoring defense two weeks ago on the road in Minnesota. Like they have that type of upside in them. I'm not saying it's a cash play, but
I just like it pains me to see a team do this to you, you know?
Dude, trust me, I know the Bills suck. Like no one knows more than I do. I'm just saying you could use their defense at 2,300 at home against the Titans. That's not a crazy pick. I think Kansas City home versus Blake Bortles could end up in a pretty positive game script because their offense is so freaking good.
So bad. That defense is so bad, man. They can't tackle anybody. They get no push. Like it's horrible. Everything they have going on.
Well,
they're 2,500. Obviously, they're not that good of a defense.
Right before we came on air, we were talking about how bad Case Keenum is. Why not the Jets? Their defense has actually been like, all right.
Yeah. I have no issue with that.
Defenses too. I mean, just you can make cases for so many defenses. I think this is a very good week to go cheap defense and spread out, among the cheap defenses. There's some weeks where I legitimately feel like, okay, I want to pay up and get some exposure to these two expensive defenses because they're in smash spots. Initially, at least, I don't feel the need to do that. So I'll probably spread out among a bunch of cheap defenses and get them at stupid low ownership because everybody's going to be like Davis and just mock the Bills. And then I'll get the Bills home versus the Titans at
the Bills defense definitely a better play than the Titans defense, for example, if we were talking about like points per dollar.
You don't need to play the Bills defense. You can just play the Lions defense.
But like, how much worse of a play is the Bills defense than the Lions versus Rodgers? Like
significantly?
Why? Significantly?
So we just talked about a team that has an excellent pass rush versus a gimpy quarterback who's going to throw all the time behind a bad offensive line. And going up against a team that's going to keep him throwing regardless of the game situation because they can actually score on offense. What's going to happen with the Bills when Derrick Henry rushes the ball 35 times?
Well, Jerry Hughes is going to change the game just like he did in Minnesota, baby.
Oh my gosh.
Back on the Bills bandwagon. Let's do it.
You're really sad.
You can get, when your NFL team just like only makes you sad, you can just leave them. Like I did that. I just divorced the Cowboys. I was like, I don't want to watch this offense. I don't want to care about them. So I'm just not going to.
I can't do that.
They can't hurt me. Like I'm not letting them hurt me.
Well, the Bills don't really hurt me. I kind of spite watch them at this point this season.
Yeah, and I don't want that. Like I live in Kansas City. The Chiefs are fun. Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL, so I'm just on the bandwagon.
Yeah, Mike, do they have something on you? Like, are they holding something over your head that like you have to root for them, or something bad is going to happen? Is this like a drag me to hell situation?
You guys just wait till I win the $9 slant with the Bills defense. And you're going to be wishing
and stacked with Josh Allen, obviously.
I'm not playing. Oh my God. Never mind. I'm not even going to go there.
No, there's like a reason to like make like one Josh Allen lineup every week just because he can like run for 3 touchdowns.
There's also like, there's a guy who's like 3,500 that like maybe you could play at wide receiver.
Oh, are you going to tout Kelvin Benjamin?
I'm not going to tout him. I'm just going to say he's just extraordinarily cheap.
Well, here's
just pointing out.
Here's the thing, Mike. No matter what salary anyone is, you're allowed to play them.
You are.
That's fact. As long as you have enough
whatever.
salary cap
This
room
Bills
left, you can
defense
play
is
that
not
way.
a bad play at 2,300. So you guys can just mock me all you want. The Bills suck. They're terrible. I know they suck. They're going to be terrible for years because they have an arrogant front office that decided to trade up 3 times in the first round, twice for Josh Allen and passing on Josh Rosen, and it's going to be a disaster. But this week specifically, their defense is a fine play at $2,300.
I will bet you the cheaper Lions defense outscores the Bills defense.
Fine, done, booked, $50. This will just be like Keegan all over again.
See, now you're the me of this situation. You've let your homerism come into play, and now I'm going to be the winner.
So I'm cheering for Keegan, essentially, is what you're saying.
Exactly. All right, that'll do it. Pat Mayo Experience. Leone, pip the site.
Yeah, head over to dailyroto.com. We've got customizable projections, ownership projections, an optimizer that lets you do all sorts of things to help build multiple teams. If you're mass multi-entering like I do, or even just building cash game lineups, it really helps you focus each and every week. And the customizability aspect of that, I think, gives it a big edge over a lot of other projection sets and optimizer sets. So check that out. Use promo code DPME for 10% off.
Boom. I suggest that everyone go use the promo code THEPME for 10% off. Davis, take cast. Where can we find it?
If you want more conversations like this one, except with less actionable advice and more talk about what the world should be like or how to deal with the way it is, you should definitely listen to the Takecast. And if you really like it, you can also sign up for extra Takecasts at patreon.com/Takecast. Pat and I are going to be doing another episode this week. And so if you like Pat, it's a natural transition.
Yeah, it's Pat Mayo like you've never heard him before. That's what that'll be my tease.
It's true.
Unless you listen to the last episode, then it'll be more like that than this.
It'll be more like that, yeah.
All right, I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and the Facebooks at the PME. Sub to the Pat Mayo Experience on iTunes, Stitcher, Podomatic, Audio Boom, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you can get your podcasts, you can get the Pat Mayo Experience. Remember, before you get out of here, enter the $20 DK giveaway by smashing the like button, leaving your DraftKings handle in the comment section, and telling me your favorite play at tight end from sub $3,000. I think that's what it was. I don't remember what happened an hour and a half ago. Anyway, I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. Good luck in the Week 5 DraftKings slate. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!